was information saying that Project Blake was a project by South Bank Mosaics. All the way through Carlisle Lane and then into Centaur Street were his pictures and poems. There were information signs about William Blake in general and Blake in Lambeth. I could not believe it. Here he was celebrated, and it seemed almost as if this celebration was part of my journey, as if this was arranged for this tour. I came out of the tunnel and stood in Hercules Road. There is a blue plaque where the Blake's house once stood. I stood there for a moment and took a deep breath. I had not expected this celebration of Blake here, and I was happy that his art and visions were recognized and acknowledged. And I was there to witness it during my journey. I made a note to come back the following days to view the mosaics in detail and with more time. Now I went further south to the Imperial War Museum. Before there was the Imperial War Museum, this was the site for the Bethlehem Royal Hospital, or Bedlam, a famous lunatic asylum, a world within a world. Blake could hear the cries of the inmates from his home. For him it was an Eurasianic institution. I will only shortly introduce William Blake here. Blake saw the London of his time, the 18th and early 19th century, as being ruled by a rigid system of oppression, where any attempt to break through the rigid boundaries of dogma and traditions is regarded by the establishment as being dangerous. For him, instances such as the Tower, Court and the New Bethlehem Insane Asylum form a fallen version of immortal London, and are therefore consequences of spiritually blind, Eurasianic, abstract, analytical reasoning and religious error. As he describes it in his poem Jerusalem, when he walks through the darkness and horrid solitude, he finds human in the crowded alleys of the poor, he sees individuals, the jewels of Albion, running down the canals of the streets and lanes as if they were a port. Blake was a critic of the social, philosophical and religious atmosphere which suffocated and suppressed human individuality and imagination, calling it Urizen's age. A fellow approached me and asked for money. I gave him something and went on in search for bus stop S, which is on Kennington Road, as I later found out. I did not find it right away, and I thought the guy might help me, but I could not find him either. There were lots of visitors from the museum running around. It was 4 o'clock when I hopped on the bus and drove south. Somehow I did not like driving away from London that far. We drove through Brixton and reached Herne Hill, the most southern point of the tour. Herne Hill near Half Moon Lane is named for Herne, an altered man whose image may date from the Iron Age. Herne usurped Diana's role as leader of the lunar hunt, a male pretender to her female throne, as Gull informs us. The name Half Moon Lane alone would make everybody smile by now. Gull also explains, below the river Afra flows. 1,000 years ago, when it still knew the light of day, Canute sailed it down to attack the city from downstream. Canute, who in his reign outlawed the worship of the moon, then tried to claim her power to turn the tides back for his own. Gull sums up, man kills the moon, exalts the sun instead. With symbols man casts woman down, and then with symbols keeps her there. I sat for a moment in lovely Brockwell Park at the foot of Herne Hill. It was first opened to the public in 1892. It had evolved out of a private estate, which in turn had evolved out of farmland. While I was sitting there, the sky turned grey and dark, and I had a strange feeling that I should be leaving if I wanted to finish my journey. I passed the Half Moon pub in Half Moon Lane and thought about having a pint. But the feeling got stronger, and so I made my way up Herne Hill, up the road with its nice suburban houses and gardens. I reached the bus stop Herne Hill Road and had to wait for some time for the bus 42. It finally came and took me back into the heart of darkness. I got off at Druid Street. I did not even smile, I just noticed it and gave the sign an understanding nod. Passerbys must have thought I was crazy. Within a stone's throw you are on Tower Bridge up the road. Right here, next to the bus stop, stood St. John's Horsley Down, another Hawksmoor church. This one had been completely destroyed by the Blitz, and only its foundations remained. The London Mission was built upon it. St. John's Horsley Down's steeple was another obelisk identical to the one at Old Street. I walked to the Thames, happy to see the river again, and went the familiar path along the waterline to London Bridge. It was almost 6 o'clock now, and almost dark. I tumbled into the city and into people getting ready to party, or being ready with working on a Saturday. Through the hustle and bustle I made my way to Pudding Lane and the monument. It is of course another obelisk, this time built by Hawksmoor's tutor Sir Christopher Wren as a memorial to those who died in the Great Fire 1666. The monument stands 202 feet high, said to be the distance from its base to the house in Pudding Lane where the fire started. The column is open to the public, although the balcony, which is reached by way of 345 black marble steps, has now been meshed over to deter suicides, of which there have been many. I staggered on through dark alleyways to the east to the Tower of London. It was dark by now, and the monstrous building with its bloody history was bathed in light. Gull thinks that this tower must hum a dynamo of blood and history. Built on a white mound named in pagan myths where Britain's founder Brutus, late of Troy, lies mouldering. According to legend, Britain has been colonized by Brutus of Troy, a grandson of the famous hero Aeneas. He came to Britain guided by the moon goddess Diana. The island was inhabited by a race of giants, the mightiest being the giant Go-Magog. Once defeated, the Trojans could settle and build New Troy, which is now London. The giant has many names, until in later versions of the story it were Gog and Magog, after the giant became curiously divided into two characters. Brutus, founder of Britain, is allegedly buried beneath the tower. Gull continues, "Here Bran's head's buried, Celtic god whose name means blessed raven. His birds nest here still. 'Tis said London's destroyed if they depart. Their population is therefore restored occasionally. Ravens imported from elsewhere that seem to stay till death. The Sol Tower of the Sun King Lud stood here, rebuilt by Romans, Normans, Britain's conquerors. Here died Jane Grey, Judge Jeffreys, Anne Boleyn, Guy Fawkes, the little princes, infant sacrifices even druids might admire." I walked past the Roman wall, left the city, and then along the highway. My feet hurt. I must have appeared confused and crazy to other people. I wondered if I went mad. They could have put me into Bedlam if they knew what I was doing that day. I reached St. George in the east. The church was even more impressive and scary when it was dark. It seemed like a beast, a temple of evil. Gull says that despite its pyramids and Roman altars, obelisks are missing, the alignment's wrong, and mentions the Ratcliffe Highway Murders. For those of you unfamiliar with these gruesome crimes, here's the story. On 7th December 1811, an entire family had been found murdered in a shop beside the highway in the most gruesome circumstances. Timothy Marr, his wife, apprentice, and their baby boy were battered to death. The baby laying in its cradle, his throat had been cut. The next attack occurred less than 3 weeks later on the 19th of December in the King's Arms, in New Gravel Lane, now Garnet Street, when the inn's owner, his wife, and their maid were killed. 7 citizens altogether, including 2 children and 1 infant, had been dispatched within 8 days. Finally, an arrest was made. A sailor named John Williams was put in custody, but before there was a trial, he committed suicide in his cell. His dead body, together with the bloody hammer and chisel, which had been the means of his crimes, were paraded past the houses where he had assisted in the murders. He was then buried beneath the crossroads, Cable Street and Cannon Street Road, or, as Thomas de Quincey puts it, in the center of a quadrivium or conflux of 4 roads with a stake driven through his heart, and over him drives forever the uproar of unresting London. I'm going to stop here and tell the rest of the story in the next video. This journey is part of my book, London and its Genius Loci, a journey beyond time and place, in which I try to find the spirit of place of this greatest city in the world. I hope you enjoyed this part of the From Hell tour. Subscribe to my channel, visit my website, buy my book, or get in touch with me. My name is Philipp Röttgers. Thank you.